Welcome to Backwoods Pursuit. I'm Gabe Garish, and today we're going to be taking a look at two premium compact spotting scopes in the Kowa TSN 55 and the Swarovski ATC. Both of these are super lightweight, awesome spotting scopes, and we're going to look at the critical differences in both the physical and optical performance between these two. I'm going to then give you two really interesting observations that I made when I was doing the testing here on these spotting scopes. Finally, I'm going to give you my winners in 9 different categories that we tested for here, which one performed the best in each of those critical categories if you are looking to pick up one of these or trying to decide between the both of them. I'll put links to both of these down in the description so you can check them out for yourself if you want. Let's get started. First, let's take a look at the differences in specs between these two before we get into optical and physical differences here. First, you've got the weight difference here between these two. It's not a lot, about a 2-ounce difference, but the Kowa does come in at 33.8 ounces, both on the advertised weight and on my scale, whereas the Swarovski here came in at 34.2 ounces is their advertised weight, but the actual weight came in at 35.8, so about just over 1.5 ounces heavier in the actual weight on my scale versus the advertised weight. So not a big difference, but still about a 2-ounce difference, and when you're looking at compact, lightweight spotters, 2 ounces is still 2 ounces. Now the eye relief on both of them comes in at 17 millimeters for the Kowa and 20 for the Swaro. So you have an advantage there with the Swaro over the Kowa. Now the Swaro has a 56 millimeter objective versus a 55 in the Kowa, so there's a slight difference there. They both have a 17 to 40 magnification range, so identical in that regard as well. Now, field of view differences between the two. With the Kowa, you have 192 feet at 1,000 yards at minimum magnification, and with the Swaro, you have 186 feet at 1,000 yards. So a little advantage there with the Kowa. Now, when you go up to maximum magnification, you have 105 feet at 1,000 yards with the Kowa versus 102 feet at 1,000 yards with the Swaro. So there again, you have a larger field of view overall with the Kowa. Now, as far as a sunshade, the Kowa here offers you a nice sunshade, whereas the Swarovski does not. If you're someone that likes to use a sunshade, and it is kind of nice to have on those bright sunny days, the Kowa definitely has an advantage there. Neither of them have an ARCA compatible foot, unfortunately. It is really a bummer when you're looking at compact spotting scopes. Trying to save weight wherever you can, you have to just throw more weight on the bottom of that by putting in a ARCA compatible plate. So definitely a bummer there. One advantage though that the Kowa does have is it has a nipple on the bottom of that foot to keep the plate from spinning, whereas the Swarovski does not. So it's certainly an advantage with the Kowa there. Now the focus mechanism is another big difference between these two. The Swarovski here has the barrel focus, which we're all used to, and it is really nice and smooth. But the Kowa has the dual focus, which we've really come to love. It makes a big difference in the field and allows you to fine focus those images at long distances more easily than a barrel focus does. So that really does improve the user experience with the Kowa over the barrel focus of the Swarovski. Now with size, the Swarovski here is a little bit shorter at 10.2 inches versus 10.7 in the Kowa. Little advantage there with the Swaro, and it is a little more slim overall. They're both very, very small, but the Swaro is a little more slim. So something to consider there if that's really something that you're needing and looking for. The eyepiece here with the Kowa gives you 4-position click stops. Now on the Swaro, you have a smooth eye cup. It spins without any click stops whatsoever, so you can stop that wherever you want within that range of adjustment, which does allow you a more fine positioning of the eye cup there. So that is really nice, and I really do like that, but it is a very different feel than what you get with the Kowa. Another physical difference here is that the Kowa does not have much of a rubber armor, whereas the Swarovski is completely covered with rubber armor. It is nice to protect the optic here that the Swarovski offers that, but it adds a little bit of weight, and that's likely one of the reasons why you have 2 extra ounces with the Swaro versus the Kowa. The Kowa has a little bit of rubber armor here up by the eyepiece, but nothing on the body. So a difference there. Some people really like to have that rubber armor. Some people don't care, but there is a difference. Now moving over to optical performance differences between these two. They were so close in our testing, but there was definitely some distinct differences we want to cover here. One being in the field of view. We talked about it just a minute ago, but the Kowa does give you an additional 8 feet at 1,000 yards versus the Swarovski at the minimum magnification and 2 extra feet at maximum. So a difference there, not a big one, but definitely a difference between the two. Now they both offer fantastic edge-to-edge clarity, but in our testing, we found that overall the Kowa was just a little bit better in its edge-to-edge clarity. Touch on more on that in a moment. One exception to that rule, but overall there's just a little more fringing on the edge of the field of view with the Swaro than the Kowa. So there we thought the Kowa was just a little bit better. They both give you a nice wide angle eyepiece, as you can tell by the generous field of view that they give you. But there is a little bit of difference in the eye box and the way that is going to allow you to use the optic in the field. They were very, very close in our testing, but we did feel like the Swarovski gave you a little bit more forgiving eye box. And by that, I mean, you don't have to be quite as perfectly aligned to get a full field of view. While the Kowa is still absolutely phenomenal, it was a little bit less forgiving, we felt like, than the Swarovski in that regard. So not a big deal, not a big difference, but there was a difference. We did feel like that was a little bit better in the Swaro. Now the eye relief, as we mentioned earlier, is a little bit more generous in the Swarovski, but one note that we did find was that the lowest position of the eye cups is lower on the Kowa, which could affect you if you're using eyeglasses. If you do wear glasses, the Kowa is going to be a little bit better for you in that you can't get the eyepiece here on the Swaro quite as close to the glass, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult in that regard. I think it will still work great with glasses. I don't wear glasses, so I can't tell you definitively on that, but it is not as close as the Kowa, and folks often say that's one of the problems they have with spotting scopes. So consider that if you do wear eyeglasses. Now that takes me to those two interesting points that I mentioned earlier on that we found when we were testing these. First one is in regards to the edge-to-edge clarity. As I mentioned earlier, the Kowa overall we felt had a better edge-to-edge clarity offering than the Swarovski. However, there was one exception, and that was until you got above 35x in the magnification. The Kowa has a nice clean and crisp edge around the black edge of the field of view, and so did the Swaro. But once you got above 35x, they got a little bit more fuzzy, a little hazy, and then the Swaro offered a better edge-to-edge clarity. So it was really interesting, something I certainly wasn't expecting, but definitely noticed that. The second thing that we noticed is that even though the Kowa offers a larger field of view by a little bit, the Swarovski felt like it offered a larger field of view. For whatever reason, I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it did feel larger when you're looking through it than the Kowa. That's just my perception. You might see something different if you're looking through them yourself, so just take that for what it is, but that's what I saw. Next, we're going to throw the digiscoping adapters on here and show you some side-by-side footage of these two spotting scopes so you can really see some of the differences for yourself. First, we have a buck bedded here about 600 yards away. They're super close in the resolution, but if I was going to pick, I would say the Swaro is slightly more crisp. Second clip here, we have some ducks on the water at about 300 yards away. And again, this is at 40x on both of them. The orange sunset is reflecting a nice, vibrant color there. Here again, I would give the slight edge to the Swaro, but it is extremely close. But then when I go ahead and flip these to a horizontal in the landscape mode in the same picture, I felt like the Kowa was just a little bit better. The third clip here was some hikers at probably 3 miles away. It was a long, long ways away, and I really couldn't discern any difference between the two. They were so incredibly close. In this last one here, we've got a buck bedded at about 200 yards. As you can see, you really can't pick up much difference between these two. They're both fantastic, no real loss of resolution or clarity. I couldn't really pick much difference out between these two here. Now finally, let's go over those 9 categories that we're going to give you a winner between these two in each of them. Some of the critical things and some of the most important things if you're looking at a compact spotting scope. Number one, most people are going to be looking at is the weight. There, the Kowa wins by 2 ounces over the Swaro. Now, as far as field of view goes, the Kowa gets the victory in that regard. It gives you an additional 8 feet at 1,000 yards over the Swarovski. Eye relief, the Swaro gives you an additional 3 millimeters over the Kowa, so it wins in that battle. The low light between the two is so very, very close, but if I had to pick a winner here, I would go with the Swarovski just barely. In the number of tests that we did, there was times where you couldn't tell a difference and there was times where you could, but typically I found the Swaro was just a little bit better if there was a difference at all. Edge-to-edge clarity was a really, really interesting one. Overall, we felt the Kowa was better as a whole, except for that 35 to 40x in magnification, the Swaro won in that regard. So I'm going to give the overall victory to the Kowa there, but with that caveat that if you use that 35 to 40 frequently, you may want to consider the Swaro in that way. Now resolution, that one's really tough. They are so incredibly close. It's really, I really actually can't pick a winner here between these two. It was just that close. They're just phenomenally good. So whichever color contrast, whichever color tone you prefer, will probably decide that for you. I felt if I was absolutely forced to pick, I would just slightly pick the Swarovski, just because there was a couple scenarios where my eyes preferred that. But overall, I really couldn't even pick one over the other there. Eye box forgiveness, we're going to give the victory to this Swaro on that. They were just a little bit easier to stay in the eyepiece and not have those black spots. While they're both absolutely phenomenal, the eyepiece of Kowa is one of our favorites overall. It just wasn't quite as easy to stay lined up as with the Swaro. Again, phenomenal both of them, but that was one difference we did find with the Swaro. Now on the focus mechanisms, we are going to give the win to the Kowa here in that regard. The dual focus with the fine focus and the coarse focus is just the best way that we've found to get that fine focus at long distances. And the reason that we found is that with a barrel focus like the Swarovski has, and really any spotting scope with a barrel focus, so when you're grabbing the entire barrel of that optic, it just introduces more shake into the unit itself. Whereas with the fine focus of the Kowa, you can just basically touch the top of that and it introduces almost no shake into the optic. So definitely the win there on the Kowa. That is our favorite of all the focus mechanisms that we have used. Now the size here, the last thing I want to talk about is just the Swarovski gets the win there with a slightly smaller body, 10.2 versus 10.7 inches, and a little bit more slim, a little more slender, so it's going to fit in your pack just a little bit easier. But again, that's really splitting hairs here because they are both so incredibly small. So that is the Kowa TSN 55 and the Swarovski ATC compact ultralight spotting scopes. They are both phenomenal. If you're looking to shave weight, if you're backpack hunting, or need to stay as light as possible but not sacrifice that premium performance, these are the ones you want to take a look at. You won't regret either one. You may prefer the color temperature of the Kowa or the Swarovski, but either way, they are phenomenal. Drop any questions or comments for us. We'd love to help you out if we can, and I'll put links to both of these down in the description. See you next time.